The average person today leaves behind roughly 1 gigabyte of data for every day they've interacted with digital systems. Your social media posts, emails, photos, and other digital traces form what she calls a digital legacy. Information patterns that persist long after your biological processes have ceased. Whether through atoms in soil or data in servers, aspects of existence continue through transformation. We're witnessing the emergence of digital immortality, explains Dr. Michael Graziano, neuroscientist at Princeton University. While not true consciousness, these information patterns preserve aspects of personality and interaction styles that extend a person's social presence beyond biological death. This technological extension of existence represents another way death functions, as transformation rather than termination. Understanding death as transformation has profound implications for how we approach mortality. Research by Dr. Kenneth Vail and colleagues found that healthy engagement with mortality awareness can increase appreciation for life, strengthen social connections, and promote altruistic behavior. When people view death as transformation rather than extinction, their fear often diminishes, replaced by a sense of connection to larger natural cycles. Cultural traditions worldwide have recognized this transformative nature of death for millennia. Hawaiian traditions view death as a transition to becoming an aumakua, a family guardian. Japanese Buddhist death rituals emphasize how elements of the deceased transform into new life forms. These perspectives reflect what anthropologist Dr. Marilyn Schlitz calls an intuitive recognition of continuity that science is now articulating. Dr. Susan Clayton's research shows that people who recognize their physical and informational continuity with natural systems often develop stronger environmental ethics and sense of meaning. Seeing yourself as part of ongoing natural cycles, rather than a discrete entity with a clear endpoint, fundamentally changes your relationship to both life and death, she explains. This transformation perspective also opens new ways of thinking about grief. When we understand that elements of our loved ones continue in new forms, grief can include not just loss but recognition of ongoing connection, explains grief researcher Dr. Robert Niemeyer. This doesn't minimize the pain of losing someone's conscious presence, but offers additional dimensions for maintaining relationship. Psychiatrist Dr. Irvin Yalom notes that what frightens people most about death is not pain or even non-existence, but meaninglessness. The transformation perspective addresses this fear by revealing how our brief consciousness participates in an ancient, ongoing process of material, genetic, and informational exchange. Nothing about us truly disappears. It merely changes form, continuing to influence the world in ways both measurable and immeasurable. This scientific understanding doesn't provide ultimate answers about what happens to consciousness after death. That frontier remains largely unexplored. But it does reveal that the binary thinking of existence versus non-existence fails to capture the complexity of what occurs at death. The mystery continues, science at death's edge. While science illuminates the mechanisms of physical transformation after death, it stands silent before the most profound question. What happens to the experience of being you? This gap between what we can measure and what we can know creates a territory where science meets its own limitations. A humbling reminder that even our most advanced understanding remains incomplete. Throughout our exploration of death's scientific frontier, we've uncovered layer upon layer of complexity. We've traced the cascade of cellular events, witnessed the surprising surge of neural activity in dying brains, and contemplated the mysterious nature of consciousness itself. Yet with each discovery, new questions emerge, questions that may lie beyond the reach of our scientific instruments. Consider what happens in those final moments when consciousness appears to intensify rather than diminish. Science can map the neural patterns, measure the electrical activity, and document similar experiences across cultures. But it cannot capture what it feels like from within. This limitation represents an intrinsic boundary of scientific inquiry itself. Dr. David Chalmers, a philosopher of consciousness at New York University, describes this as an explanatory gap. Even if we had a complete map of every neural process occurring during death, we still wouldn't know what it's like to experience those processes. This defines the frontier where objective measurement meets subjective experience, like looking through a keyhole at an infinite landscape beyond. The challenge intensifies when we consider how our tools for studying death are fundamentally limited. We can observe the brain activity of those approaching death and interview those who return from its threshold, but we cannot directly access the experience of death itself. It resembles attempting to understand what happens inside a black hole without crossing its event horizon. Some researchers propose innovative approaches to address this gap. Dr. Rebecca Berkowitz at Johns Hopkins University develops phenomenological bridges, using virtual reality and neural mapping to create models of subjective experiences based on brain activity. We might never directly know another's experience, she explains, but we can build sophisticated models that help us imagine what can't be directly measured. These efforts demonstrate science's creativity in approaching seemingly unanswerable questions, while highlighting a profound humility that emerges at death's frontier. A recognition that some mysteries may be woven into existence itself. This humility enriches, rather than diminishes science. Physicist Dr. Carlo Rovelli observes, "Great science isn't about having all the answers. It's about better understanding the questions. Acknowledging the boundaries of scientific knowledge deepens, rather than retreats from inquiry. The mystery of death bridges scientific and philosophical domains in valuable ways. Questions about what happens to consciousness after death confront assumptions about what consciousness is in the first place. Is it generated solely by the brain? Could it exist in forms we haven't measured? These shape how we understand what it means to be alive, to perceive, to exist." Dr. Elizabeth Markson, a bioethicist at Columbia University, notes that death research creates a peculiar interdisciplinary space. It forces neurologists to think like philosophers, and philosophers to engage with empirical data. This crossover generates insights that neither field could reach alone. When scientists acknowledge measurement's limits, they often discover entirely new approaches to life's fundamental puzzles. The edge of death reveals something remarkable about human consciousness, how it continues to search for meaning when faced with its own limitations. Rather than paralysis before the unknown, the mind constructs frameworks of understanding. This meaning-making capacity reflects consciousness examining itself, creating understanding even when confronted with the unknowable. Cultural anthropologist Dr. Marion Chen observes the irony that the same consciousness that cannot fully understand its own dissolution is remarkably equipped to create meaning from that very limitation. This suggests the mystery of death isn't simply a knowledge gap, but a fundamental aspect of being human. An invitation to wonder that has inspired art, philosophy, and science throughout history. Consider how differently we experience music compared to analyzing its acoustic properties. We can measure sound waves with precision, yet those measurements tell us nothing about what it feels like to be moved by a symphony. Similarly, mapping every molecular change in a dying brain might still miss the subjective experience those changes create. This distinction between measurement and experience creates what philosopher Thomas Nagel called the view from nowhere, the impossibility of objective science fully capturing subjective experience. Rather than science's failure, this reveals something profound about consciousness itself, that certain aspects of experience remain irreducibly first-person. Dr. Catherine Withy suggests that the study of death may ultimately reveal more about the nature of knowledge itself than about death. Confronting the limits of what we can know provides insight into what knowing actually is, not just accumulating facts, but engaging with reality through embodied, subjective experience. This perspective transforms our approach to death's mystery. The limitations aren't temporary gaps to fill, but defining features of human experience. Boundaries that give shape and meaning to our understanding. Like a frame around a painting, these limitations don't restrict our vision, but focus it. Perhaps most valuably, death research reveals that uncertainty itself can be a source of wonder rather than fear. Acknowledging the inherent mystery at life's end allows us to approach death with curiosity and even appreciation. The unknown becomes a horizon that gives depth to our existence. This doesn't require abandoning scientific inquiry, but invites a more expansive science that recognizes its boundaries while pushing against them. As these mysteries continue to fuel both scientific exploration and philosophical reflection, they remind us that the same mind capable of fearing death's unknown can also find profound wonder in that very mystery. Throughout our journey, we've seen how death transcends simplistic definitions. From cellular mechanisms to near-death phenomena, science continues revealing death as a complex transition where biological processes unfold in surprising ways. What does this mean for us? We can approach mortality with wonder rather than dread. The atoms comprising our bodies have existed for billions of years and will continue their cosmic journey indefinitely. Death becomes a doorway connecting us to natural cycles that preceded us. Our legacy lives in life's continuous evolution. How will you contribute to this endless dance of nature? Consider your place